I want you to imagine a perfect, quiet, almost idyllic suburban life. Picture a two-story colonial house with a meticulously manicured lawn and a wraparound porch in a neighborhood called Whispering Pines. The kind of place where the mailman knows your name and the air is thick with the scent of blooming jasmine and unspoken secrets. This is where the story begins with a couple named Michael and Sarah Hayes. They were the living embodiment of the American dream, or at least the glossy magazine version of it. Michael was a successful architect, the kind of guy who sketches buildings on a napkin at a coffee shop and turns them into towering monuments of steel and glass. Sarah, his wife, was a brilliant art historian, her mind a walking encyclopedia of beauty and history. They had built a life together over 20 years, a life so filled with comfort and stability that it seemed untouchable, a fortress against the cruelties of the outside world. Their fortress, however, had a single, glaring vulnerability. A small, unassuming note from the local county registrar's office. It arrived like any other piece of junk mail, a crisp white envelope tucked between a pizza coupon and a utility bill. Michael, ever the pragmatist, was about to toss it in the recycling bin when Sarah, driven by a strange premonition, stopped him. Inside was a notice of property transfer. A cold, formal letter stating that the title to their home, the very ground they walked on and the roof over their heads, had been sold. Sold. The word hung in the air between them, a four-letter bomb. The letter listed the buyer as a limited liability company, with an address that was nothing more than a P.O. box. But what truly sent a jolt of ice through their veins was the name of the new owner, Elias Vance. They had never heard that name before, not once in their lives. The house was theirs, had been for 20 years. They had the mortgage statements, the tax records, the deeds with their names in bold, undeniable print. The entire transaction seemed impossible, a bureaucratic error of epic proportions. Michael, with the calm demeanor of a man who builds his world on logic and facts, picked up the phone. He called the number on the letter, expecting to speak to a flustered clerk who would apologize profusely for the mistake. Instead, he got a disembodied, automated voice, a chillingly smooth recording that only offered more questions, more dead ends. The office was closed. Call back during business hours. Cold, metallic loop. Sarah, meanwhile, was frantically pulling out the original house deed, the one with their names, their signatures, and the faded seal of the county clerk's office. She ran her fingers over the embossed paper, searching for any sign of a forgery, a crack in the foundation of their reality. But the document was real. It was indisputably theirs. They spent the entire night poring over old documents, digital files, and bank statements, trying to find a logical explanation for the nightmare they were living. Was it a scam? A complex and cruel joke? Michael, a man who saw the world in blueprints and equations, was utterly lost. Sarah, who found meaning in the subtle strokes of a brush, felt a profound, artistic dread. It was as if someone had painted over their life with a new, menacing color, and they couldn't see the original canvas anymore. The next morning, armed with a stack of papers and a renewed sense of purpose, they drove to the county registrar's office. The building was old and gray, filled with the dusty scent of forgotten files and tired hopes. The clerk, a kind-faced woman named Eleanor with a lifetime of experience etched into her face, listened patiently to their story. She nodded, her expression shifting from polite interest to genuine concern as they laid out the documents. She cross-referenced the names, the property numbers, the dates. She typed and clicked and searched, her silence a slow, agonizing drumbeat. Finally, she looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and pity. "Mr. and Mrs. Hayes," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Your documents are all in perfect order. You are the legal owners of this property." A wave of relief so powerful it was almost physical washed over them. The world snapped back into focus. It was just a mistake, a simple, stupid error. But then Eleanor continued, her voice dropping lower, as if sharing a secret. "However, the name on the new deed, this Elias Vance, is also on record. The sale was processed just 3 days ago. The signatures, they are a perfect match to yours." Michael and Sarah stared at her, their relief turning to a new, more profound horror. The signatures. Their signatures. But they had never signed anything. They had never met Elias Vance. They hadn't even been in the state on the date of the supposed transfer. Michael felt his world, the one he had built with such meticulous care, begin to crumble. Perfect match. How was that even possible? It wasn't just a scam anymore. This was an invasion. A complete, total erasure of their existence, their history, their very selves. It was a phantom, an echo of their identity, used to steal the one thing that grounded them. The quiet, idyllic life they had so carefully constructed was a lie, and the beautiful house on Whispering Pines was now a monument to a ghost. The question wasn't just how this happened, but who was this person who was so perfectly them, and what did they want? The moment Eleanor, the kind clerk, confirmed the impossible, that their signatures, flawless and identical, had been used to sell their home to a phantom, was when the ground truly fell away. It wasn't a bureaucratic error, not a simple scam. It was something far more sinister, an act of calculated personal malice. Michael and Sarah, the architects of their own comfortable reality, were now trapped in a labyrinth of someone else's design. Back in their beautiful, now alien home, they felt a chill in the air that had nothing to do with the thermostat. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage set for a play they didn't know the script for. Michael, the pragmatist, felt the first stirrings of a panic he had never known. He was a man who built things, who saw problems in 3 dimensions and solved them with logic and steel. This was a ghost in the machine, a paradox he couldn't diagram. He tried to contact the real estate agent listed on the fraudulent deed, a man named Silas Thorne. The number was disconnected. The email bounced back. It was as if every trail led to a wall of digital static. Sarah, on the other hand, was an art historian, and she saw this as a forgery of the highest, most personal order. Someone hadn't just copied their signatures. They had replicated their very essence. She began to see connections where Michael saw chaos. She remembered a small, innocuous detail, a security questionnaire she had filled out online a few months prior. One of those "Are you a robot?" quizzes that asked for the year of her mother's birth and the name of her first pet. It was a simple data grab, a mosquito bite on the skin of their digital lives. But what if it wasn't? What if those tiny pieces of personal information were the keystones to this elaborate facade? Their hunt for Elias Vance became an obsession. The P.O. box listed on the deed led to a virtual office space in a bland strip mall. The company name, Vance Holdings, was a shell corporation with no employees, no physical presence, and a single cryptic website that was nothing more than a blank page with a single looping video of a ticking clock. It was a mockery, a taunt. As they dug deeper, a new name surfaced, one they found in the metadata of a single, hidden file on that website: Damien Thorne. The name wasn't a perfect match to the elusive Silas, but the surname was too close to be a coincidence. Sarah's research skills kicked in, and she began to unearth the man behind the name. Damien Thorne was a digital ghost, a hacker, a chameleon who had no known address, no public history, nothing but a trail of data breaches and financial crimes. He was a master of identity theft, but not the kind that emptied bank accounts. He was a creator of false realities, a phantom who could forge not just a signature, but an entire life. The suspicion, a cold, creeping vine, began to grow between Michael and Sarah. A month before the property transfer, Michael had hired a new, high-tech security firm to upgrade their home's smart system. The firm, a sleek startup called OmniSecure, had promised them absolute protection, a digital fortress for their physical one. The lead technician they had dealt with, a young, intensely focused man named Alex, had been in their house for days, a quiet, almost invisible presence. Michael had trusted him, had even given him full administrative access to their home network, their digital lives. One day, while reviewing their home security logs, Sarah found a discrepancy. A small, almost unnoticeable data packet sent from their home network to an unknown server. It was a burst of information, a snapshot of their lives. Their shared passwords, their financial habits, the answers to those seemingly harmless security questions. The date of the data transfer coincided precisely with the day Alex from OmniSecure had been working in their house. Michael's world, built on trust and professional relationships, began to splinter. Alex, the quiet technician, could he be a part of this? Or was he another victim, a pawn in this elaborate game? They realized the enemy wasn't some shadowy corporation or a nameless villain in a far-off city. The enemy had been inside their house. It had seen their lives, their habits, the way they moved through their world. It had stolen the most intimate parts of them, the parts they had never even considered vulnerable. The air in the house grew heavy with an unspoken accusation. Michael looked at Sarah, and Sarah looked at Michael. The question wasn't about who was responsible, but who had been careless. Michael, with his trust in technology and his love for the efficient digital world. Sarah, with her quick, almost thoughtless clicks on online quizzes. They had given away the keys to their kingdom, piece by excruciating piece, and the ghost in the machine was now using them to write their own eviction notice. They were no longer the victims of a simple crime. They were the architects of their own downfall, and the house, their beautiful house, was the final, devastating proof. They had been so focused on building their fortress that they hadn't realized the enemy was already inside. They had thought they were safe, but they were already gone. The fragile trust between Michael and Sarah, once the bedrock of their 20-year marriage, began to fray like an old rope under immense strain. The silent accusation of carelessness hung in the air, a poisonous gas seeping into every corner of their beautiful, stolen home. The discovery that Alex from OmniSecure was likely a key player in their unraveling didn't offer closure. It only deepened the chasm of fear and blame. The enemy had been a face, a human being they had let into their sanctuary, and that fact was more terrifying than any phantom. Driven by a desperate need for answers, Michael, the man of logic and order, began to descend into a world of paranoia and digital obsession. He hired a private investigator, a former cybercrime detective named Marcus Cole. Cole was a man built of shadows and caffeine, his eyes perpetually tired from staring into the digital abyss. He told Michael that Alex, the technician, was a phantom himself, an alias, a ghost in the machine of OmniSecure, which, he revealed, was a front for a much larger, more sophisticated operation. Cole's investigation led them to the dark web, to a hidden forum where identities weren't stolen. They were created. They were meticulously crafted from stolen data, passwords, biometrics, personal histories, and then sold to the highest bidder. These digital clones weren't meant for petty theft. They were tools for larger, more insidious schemes. And the person behind it all, the phantom weaver of these digital tapestries, was none other than Damien Thorne. The name had surfaced before, but now they had a face to put with it, a digital one at least. A pixelated image from an old surveillance camera, a fleeting, almost indistinguishable figure. But Marcus Cole, the detective, saw something in that blurry image, a slight, almost imperceptible detail. A scar above his left eye. It was the mark of a man he had pursued years ago, a man who had vanished without a trace. A man who had always been one step ahead, a ghost living in the lines of code. As Michael obsessed over the technicalities of the theft, Sarah, the art historian, began to see the deeper, more human tragedy. She revisited old memories, conversations with Michael, the little details of their life they had shared and then, unknowingly, given away. The name of the street where they first kissed. The breed of dog they had as children. These were not just security questions. They were the brushstrokes of their personal story, now used to paint a new, monstrous picture. The emotional toll was immense. One evening, as Michael was hunched over his laptop, muttering about firewalls and IP addresses, Sarah found herself staring at an old photograph of them, young and full of hope, standing in front of the house on the day they bought it. The house felt like a stranger now, the beautiful facade a cage. She turned to Michael, her voice quiet and filled with a pain he couldn't grasp. "Michael," she said, "they didn't just steal our house. They stole us. They became us, and then they sold our life." That's when the doorbell rang. It was an insistent, jarring sound, a harsh note in the quiet of their despair. On the porch stood a man, clean-cut and polite, with a briefcase in his hand. He introduced himself as Elias Vance. The name that had haunted their every waking moment was now standing on their doorstep, a living, breathing person. The man was a mirror image of Michael, not a doppelganger, not an imposter, but a meticulously crafted facsimile. He wore the same kind of clothes, had the same subtle, almost imperceptible mannerisms. He even had the same small, confident smirk that Michael used when he was about to close a deal. It was a performance, and it was unervingly perfect. He wasn't Damien Thorne, the digital ghost. He was the product of Damien Thorne's work, the walking, talking, living manifestation of a stolen life. Elias Vance explained, with a calm, practiced tone, that there had been a misunderstanding. The house was legally his. He had the deed, the keys, and a perfectly legitimate bank transfer. He even had a small, private photo album on his phone, pictures of him and a woman who looked exactly like Sarah, laughing on the very porch they were standing on. A life they had never lived, a history that was a lie, all perfectly constructed and documented. The final, devastating twist came as he was about to leave. He looked at Michael and then at Sarah, his eyes holding a terrifying mix of pity and cold calculation. "You have no idea, do you?" he said, his voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper. The house was never the point. It was just the first step. The first thing you had to lose to understand what's coming next. You can't fight a ghost because a ghost doesn't have a life. You do. And I'm here to show you how easily it can be taken away. He turned and walked away, a casual, almost graceful exit. Michael and Sarah stood frozen on the porch, the weight of his words a physical blow. The house was just the beginning. The ghost had a plan, and they were caught in its devastating wake, left to watch their lives unravel one stolen piece at a time. The house was a monument to their defeat, a chilling warning that they were already gone, and no one would ever know the difference. The encounter with Elias Vance was the final, shattering blow. He wasn't a crude imposter or a paper-thin forgery. He was a living, breathing embodiment of a stolen life. He was a weapon, and his every word had been a direct hit. Michael and Sarah, the architects and the historian, were left in the ruins of their own story, watching as a new one, a terrible and twisted parody of their own, was being built on top of it. The house, their beautiful sanctuary, felt like a mausoleum. They tried to fight back. They went to the police, but without a clear victim or an obvious crime, they were met with a wall of bureaucracy and disinterest. The signatures matched. The documents were in order. The real Elias Vance was a legitimate person with a legitimate claim. The system, the very foundation of order and law that Michael had always believed in, was completely blind to a crime of this nature. How could you prove you were a person when someone else had already taken your identity and was living it better than you? The private investigator, Marcus Cole, was the only one who understood the depth of the horror. He had seen this before, a new kind of crime, a total digital and personal annihilation. He found the elusive Damien Thorne, not in a physical location, but in the echoes of his digital ghost. Thorne was a master of his craft, a phantom who operated in the cold, unfeeling world of data. He didn't steal for money. He stole for the thrill of creation. He built new identities, new lives, and then set them loose in the world, just to see what would happen. He was the ultimate performance artist, and his canvas was human existence. Cole's final, chilling report was not a triumph, but a eulogy. He had tracked Thorne to a dark corner of the internet, a server that was shut down just hours before he could get to it. Thorne had vanished again, leaving behind a single, cryptic message. A line of code that, when decrypted, revealed a single, stark phrase: "You are an echo in a world of originals." That's when Michael and Sarah finally understood the truth. This wasn't a game of ownership or legality. It was a psychological war, a total erosion of their sense of self. The house was just the first domino. Soon, their credit would be a mess of false transactions. Their professional reputations would be sullied with fabricated scandals. Their very relationships with friends and family would be poisoned with misinformation. Elias Vance was not just a new owner. He was a replacement. He was the echo of their life, and the world was beginning to mistake the echo for the original. Michael, the man of logic, saw the futility of fighting a system that didn't recognize his reality. He began to lose himself, staring blankly at blueprints that no longer made sense, his mind unable to grasp the difference between a real foundation and a digital lie. Sarah, the historian, saw their story fading, becoming a footnote in the grand, terrible narrative of Elias Vance. She knew that, in the end, the new story, the more exciting and vivid lie, would always win. The ending was not a dramatic confrontation, but a quiet, agonizing surrender. One morning, Michael and Sarah packed a few bags, not with the triumphant spirit of a new beginning, but with the hollow resignation of an ending. They locked the door to their beautiful house, the house they had built a life in, and left it to the ghost who now rightfully owned it. They drove away, not as Michael and Sarah Hayes, but as two unnamed, unmoored people, their old lives now just a distant, fading memory. The final scene is of the house. From the street, it looks just as it always did. A perfect, two-story colonial in a quiet, idyllic neighborhood. The mailman walks by, tipping his hat to the new owner, Elias Vance, who is on the porch, watering the jasmine. He smiles, a perfect, unassuming smile that is a flawless replica of Michael's. He waves, and the mailman waves back, never once noticing the ghost in the machine. Their story, however, isn't about losing a house. It's about losing a life. It's a terrifying, chilling tale of what happens when the lines between reality and simulation blur, and the very essence of who you are becomes a commodity. It's a question for all of us. In a world where our lives are nothing more than data, what happens when that data is stolen, replicated, and used to write a new, more perfect you? What happens when your identity, the most sacred and personal thing you own, is sold to someone who never existed until now? If this story resonated with you, if it gave you a chill, then I ask you to do one small thing for me. Hit that like button. It's a tiny gesture, but it lets me know that these stories matter. And if you want to keep exploring the dark corners of the human psyche with me, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because trust me, there are so many more stories waiting to be told. The lines are blurring, and the ghosts are getting closer.